Mesdames et messieurs, ladies and gentlemen, veuillez accueillir, please welcome Miguel Gaspar, Ursula Mathar, Philippe Montantême en conversation avec, in conversation with Sandra Suture.
Good morning. You know, we can't see any of you, which is why it's like, wow, look at all those people out there. So I'm Professor Sandra Suture. I'm from Harvard Business School. And just to pick up for a second on a theme that was introduced in the last segment, I study trust. So I study how companies earn trust and how, in the event that they lose it, they gain it back. And I can't think of a bigger topic that is important to how it is that we will mount this challenge that we face, is the trust that we're going to ask people to have in all the new ways that we're asking them to work. So this is a huge ask, and we have a very good, wonderful panel to talk about it with. I'm going to invite you to use Slido if you'd like to enter questions, which will take some 5 minutes at the end, and be able to respond to the things that you think of as you hear the people here speaking. So let me first introduce Philippe Montantême, who is the Senior Vice President of Strategy, Marketing, and Research at Total. And I'm going to ask him the first question, then Ursula, you the second, and then you the third, Miguel. So, Philippe, as an oil company, what concrete steps is Total taking to reduce the impact of mobility on the environment?
Okay, yes, good morning, everybody. Yes, Total is an oil company, the fourth major oil company in the world. But now I think we are more than that. We have an energy company. We have really moved. We are not just supplying oil product, but also gas, renewable gas, electricity, low carbon electricity, hydrogen. So we really want to be open to supply any energy for mobility. And that's really a big change. We are moving toward this point of being an energy company. We want to be the responsible energy major tomorrow. Not only supplying energy, we want also to take care of the customer experience, because I think that's a major change for our customer, either private customer, either companies, to how to manage this change, or to integrate new energy, or to manage a mix of energy during a few years, because even if the fleet of vehicles are changing, we'll have a cohabitation of oil fleets with gas, with electricity, and we need to have a customer experience which is satisfactory if we want the customer to move and to change.
Right.
We want to move in an ecosystem because we are not alone. We cannot change the world alone. We want to be a part of it, but OEMs have something to do, of course. Municipalities, ONGs, governments, regulations, European, everything has to be done, and we have to work in this ecosystem. We have to keep an eye on the efficiency, because I think that at the end of the day, we have seen in the past 10 or 20 years, a big saving of energy was possible to be done by improving the efficiency of the cars, by having a better usage of the energy. And we want to keep that. Even if we are changing new energy, we are always to keep in mind that we have to save energy first. That's the most important point. Even before changing, we have to save it. Even if it is electricity, we have to be smart in charging. We have to select the right time to charge the cars, the right power, the right place. So we want to be there. And it's a challenge for the company as well. So we have purchased some startups. We have changed organization. I will perhaps come back on that later on.
Okay, great. So Ursula, who is Ursula Mathar, she's Vice President of Sustainability and Environmental Protection at BMW. So Ursula, if we had a global view, what actions would we see that BMW has already taken to try to work on the issue of climate change?
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Thanks for having me here. And Sandra, yes, one would see that we are moving from a car maker to a mobility company, and mobility company includes part of a tech company, so IT, and this is something you just saw in Lisbon is a very important thing for us for the connectivity and the automated car of the future. But the connectivity is something that is really also being beneficial to the environment. But altogether, what is a very concrete activity is that we are not only looking at the carbon regulation to fulfill it, of course, for the fleet emissions, but we are taking a broader view. So especially for electrification, we believe that it's not only about having no emission locally, but to really have the complete picture, not only to change the engine from a combustion engine to electric motor, but to really look at what do you need to produce the battery cells, for example. What do you need to produce the whole car? What does your supplier needs? What is the whole carbon footprint you have with the car? So until recycling. So this complete view is something we are taking, and this was the starting point was the BMW i3, which is here on site as well for test drives. There we started this concept of life cycle management, and this is something we are driving through our portfolio now. And this is one of the main changes, at the same time a challenge, because you do not have all possibilities, you have to find the measures, but this is what we are really driving for.
Okay, excellent. Okay, Miguel. Miguel is the Deputy Mayor for Mobility and Safety and Smart Cities in Lisbon. So if we went to Lisbon today, and what actions would we see that you've taken to reduce the environmental impact of urban transport?
Well, good day everyone, and thank you for the invitation. Just to be very clear, I think it's important just to give a step back and discuss the why. And I will use the words of the Secretary General for the United Nations that I think it was last week, when he said basically we set very ambitious goals for the Paris Agreement for cities and countries, and to limit the increase of temperature to 1.5. But he had two important messages. One is that we are running late on those objectives. Second is actually if we meet those objectives, it won't be enough. Actually, the temperature will rise 3 degrees, and that is basically catastrophic for the humankind. So basically for cities, that this transformation will not happen without cities, we need bold and we need fast action. What we are doing in the city of Lisbon is actually, we are doing 2 kinds of measures. One, of course, is about adaptation and resilience, because the climate is changing. And just to give you a very quick example, we are doing a very large garden, which is a 50,000 square meters garden, when 10,000 of those square meters actually were roads. So we are cutting road space and put green space, and actually act as basins when there is big rain to avoid floods. So that's the kind of project that cities have to do. But on mobility, what we are trying to do is lead by example. And for that, we are changing, for instance, half of our bus fleet. We are actually buying a new bus that they are at least 25 more efficient than the highest Euro 6 norm. We have a very interesting project for electric buses and for trams. We are more than doubling the tram capacity, and we are building a solar farm that are actually because of the tweak of the national law, we can produce energy during the sun, put it in a network, and then free of charge get back that energy by night to actually use it in the bus. So it will be locally it will be a zero emission bus. And then of course we have to look to the specifics and look for the community and the ecosystem of mobility, because when you look where you see where the energy is being spent, and when you act in decarbonization, the topic of urban logistics and services, it's key. If you don't change urban logistics in cities, you won't achieve the targets, period. So there is a lot to be done there, and we are trying to start that discussion. I think we will have time today to speak about that.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for giving us a first picture of what it is that you're thinking about. If we had to ask you, what was the hardest challenge that you faced so far, and what did you do to surmount that challenge? Because this is a battle that's being fought day by day. And so I think it's important to take stock of where we are right now, what's already been accomplished, and what's hard to do. So, do you want to get us started, Philippe?
Yeah, I will put two points. First of all, it's a question of know-how, because we think we have a strong asset, which is our asset of customer asset. We have a deep knowledge of the way to handle mobility, transport, and so on. That was our job for years. We have really to get new competencies. That's why we make some significant purchase. We purchased a Dutch company, which was a leader in the gas business in Netherlands for trucks, so introduced this company. We purchased it 2 years ago. We purchased a French company, which is called G2 Mobility, which was one of the leaders of the charging management of electric charging in France, so to get some competence. And when we transform this company in competence center, so now we are building full competence center for this new energy, and we need also to transform our salespeople. Our salespeople must be able to sell electricity, gas, and to sell the services who go around that. That's a new training, so it's a lot of training, a lot of new innovation to bring inside the company. The second point is profitability. Now we have something like 0.5% of the car running in the world which are electric. So it's very limited. Now we have to put some big investment. We are installing some very high power service charging point in our service station, in 300 service stations, to have a full network of 150 kilometers on all the motorway in Western Europe. So that's a big investment. It's more than $100 million. So we have to finance this investment, but we don't have a direct payback today. So that's also, everybody has to understand that we have to invest, to put money, to decide to take the decision, but also it's a challenge, because we don't see today, we are not sure about the payback and the profitability of that. So it's also a challenge to motivate our management to understand that we need to do it, even if we are not sure about the profitability today.
Great. Ursula, so the hardest challenge that you've had to face so far at BMW and walking down this road?
I addressed already the change from being a car maker to a mobility company, and included in that is, of course, that we are in alignment with the Paris Agreement, and we analyzed what does it mean. There was a project called the Science-Based Target Project, so some of you may know it, and we really nailed it down to how much carbon budget is left for us in a way, yeah, and that means, made it very clear that electrification is needed, and not in 10 or 20 years, but it's needed now. And we put a lot of products on the market, but we see that the uptake of these products is very different if you look at the different countries. And there, the challenge is really to get to this chicken and egg problem, how we call it. It's the charging is needed, the local circumstances are needed, like incentives to change for customers. And at the same time, if charging is not yet there, and you are investing a lot in that, I learned, but if it's not there, companies may say, okay, nobody is driving electric, so why should I invest in charging? But customers are saying, why should I invest in an electric car if no charging is available? I cannot drive it. So this is really something which needs a lot of activities in the different cities, and also with the politicians in different countries. And this is something which is very different from producing great cars and selling them to people who know the brand. Yeah, so this is really a culture change within the company, to move also to the services we have in cities, like sharing services, and this is really a big change within the company, but also that we really have to base our business on collaboration.
Okay, we'll come back to that theme of collaboration in just a moment. So, Miguel, the hardest thing you've had to do in your role as deputy mayor?
Well, I have a lot of different kinds of hard things to do. Sometimes, when discussing with with a resident of Lisbon explaining why we have to do things that sometimes are not that well understandable. And well, residents are the stakeholders of politicians, so we do have interesting negotiations with them. But going globally, and I think that's the point of conference today, I think that one of the biggest challenges that we have is how do we come from the global perspective that companies have to actually act locally. And we have just seen two different kinds of companies, and they are saying something that's very clear. When we look to the Paris Agreement targets, the date is 2030. 2030 is 10 years. 10 years for a city time, it's 1 day of the life of the city. It goes very fast. But big companies, 10 years, it's not that much. It's if you put on the budget of a life cycle budget of a project, you see that 10 years to develop, sell the product, have impact, it's more or less the life cycle of the product. So the point is, on the next next maybe 24 months or so, companies and cities will have to launch their projects that will be bold enough to actually reach the targets of 2030. And sometimes what Total is saying, for instance, but I can go for companies like Heineken that have very strong sustainable policies, and then I can see how they are acting in Lisbon, and in my opinion, maybe they are not doing enough. But I think there is a role for cities for that, because cities can leverage the playing field. Usually there is an extra cost on being more sustainable. And if you don't leverage a playing field, sometimes with some kind of regulation, then those that behave better will be penalized on their financial results by those that are actually competing in an unfair way. So I think one of the biggest challenges that we have is how can we move and how can we have confidence in each other, that each one of us will do its part in order that big companies put their investment where they have to achieve the environmental targets, but also that cities ensure that they are fair and have a straight regulation that ensure proper competition in a market in a way that actually those products reach people and give benefits to people. That can be to deploy the infrastructure, electric infrastructure in a neutral way. That can be enforcing, and that, for instance, in Lisbon, what we have green tendering procedures. So when we are going for public funds or when we are contracting stuff, we have environmental targets that have to be achieved by anyone that applies. And these kind of measures can actually be taken to make companies move faster to where we need them to go to actually to achieve those targets.
Okay, so let's continue on this theme of cooperation. So we talk about the ecosystem as if it's a thing, but it's composed of human beings, individually, collectively, organizationally, institutions, and someone has to make the first call. Someone has to pick up the phone and say, we'd like to talk with you about some changes that we've made or that we'd like to make. So whose job is it, do you think it is, to pick up the phone and get the ball rolling?
No, well, I can start. Usually the kind of speech that we have with companies, it's more or less like this. So basically, we don't speak with each other. So, and I think that's changing a lot because more and more cities are understanding and companies are understanding that we have to sit at a kind of a round table and discuss the governance of mobility of cities. And then, of course, there is a difficulty on these things because cities are very, very local by definition, and companies are usually very global by definition. And of course, there has to be, I usually say that there is lacking a common language between cities and OEMs and big companies to deploy services and to deploy rules in a way that we can have some stability in where we are going to. It can be very, very small examples. For instance, why should we have different language to check in and check out of an on-street parking spot? Why don't we share online traffic data for improving urban logistics? So why don't we create an ecosystem where we can ask Total, what do you need to deploy faster electric chargers in the city of Lisbon? Just for you give a very quick example, and we are deploying in the city of Lisbon, what we are doing is that we are creating informal meetings and sometimes kind of soft regulation instead of hard regulation because we are discussing a lot of greenfield stuff that we don't exactly know fully the rules, fully understand the projects. And every month we have conversations with stakeholders to say, what can we do better together? And this kind of conversation that cannot only be done in Lisbon, it has to be done in Madrid, in Paris, in São Paulo, in Chicago. It has to go a bit wider and check what are the common services that the electric, connected, and shared car, when you say connected, it means that it's connected to a city. I usually say the autonomous car cannot just be cruising around the block while you have your meal. So cities have to tell car XYZ to park on place 1, 2, 3, because that's a more efficient way to park. But all this vision, it's yet to be built, and we have to work a lot on it.
So Ursula, what do you think?
Yeah, I believe that a lot of activities have been started, and we created a team working on open mobility to be a partner for cities. But of course, they started with cities nearby in Germany. Yeah, so there we have some project in Berlin or Hamburg, for example, on charging, but also on how do we solve the question of, you are having too much space in a city where cars are just parked for 23 hours of a day and only 1 hour they are moving. So for us, it was a motivation to start with car sharing and to convince also citizens that car sharing might be an option for them, depending on what is their use pattern of their car, whether they need it every day or whether they need it just once a month. If they need it once a month, maybe car sharing is the much better option. And for the city perspective, a car sharing car needs less space because one car can substitute up to 10 privately owned cars. So these are the activities we are starting, small scale, but as you're mentioning, we need broad scale in order to really use the next 10 years for decarbonization altogether and to keep the quality of life in a city so that people really enjoy living there. And mobility is something positive and not only negative with congestion and looking for a parking space. And I think you mentioned it very right. We, as a company, come from the global perspective, and we develop things, but now we need to sit together and see what is needed for both sides. And both sides, both partners have to step a bit away from the solution they already developed to come up with a joint solution in the end. Because it won't work that cities like you develop one thing and we develop one thing, and then there is 10% where it doesn't fit together, where the systems cannot communicate or the language is not the same.
So let me just follow up for a second on that. So how do you decide how to deploy your resources, given all the cities that you do business in around the world as BMW? And how do you decide that it's now time for you to reach out to Lisbon?
Difficult question, where to put the resources, yes. But I think we need to find it. We need to start somewhere, and we need to find the best mix of having global solutions and local ones. Yeah. It's only, you mentioned it, through human beings. The ecosystem is human beings in the end, in the city, in the corporates, and also the customers who are the ones to use it in the end. So we have to understand the perspectives and trust each other. You started this discussion with the word trust. Yeah, only with trust we can move.
Cities are usually very conservative, and we have to be open to innovation and understand that innovation sometimes goes wrong. And that's part of the process. So but if we have a dialogue with the stakeholder, the other side, then we can solve the problems together. Well, in the city of Lisbon, we have been awarded the Mobility Week Award for last year, and we are going to be Green Capital next year. And the reason why we are getting these awards is not because we are the best in what we are doing, but we are committed to change faster. And for change faster, we need the trust of these companies, and it's quite interesting to see that companies are moving to Lisbon because they understand there is some vibe in the city that is actually changing a bit, because the city is open to that transformation. And they are saying, let's experiment there, and then if it works, how can we push it further away. Of course, we have a role, for instance, for the European Commission. When you see the last ITS directive, which is a regulation for day one and a half and second day ITS services, there is already some things going inside the pipeline from the regulation, and it has to be sometimes like that. But it has a lot to be done at the local level, at the cities. And there's a lot of cities doing this very well. Hidalgo, for instance, in Paris, it's doing very well this process of articulating the stakeholders. They're doing very well. I was in Boston the other day. They are also doing this kind of things. I think the biggest difference between the European cities and the US cities, in the US they are very focused on Vision Zero for fatality and not that much in decarbonization, and at the European level, decarbonization is a stronger ambition. But we are moving in the same direction, and that's the most important things. And even when countries say, well, forget about the Paris Agreement, we still see cities, no, don't forget about it. We need to provide a better world to our children and our kids. So I think change is happening, but the point is, it's not happening fast enough. And we have to discuss how can we change faster.
So,
Yes.
yeah, what do you think?
Yes,
Philippe?
and I think nobody has a solution. I mean, it's a mix of solutions, it's a transition. So I think it's no more a relation between a supplier and a purchaser like we used to have for 50 years, just selling diesel for the buses. And I think it's no more that. Now, nobody has a solution. Now we have to, and the solution can be very different from one city to another. It's a mix of solutions. We should do gas, we should do renewable gas, electricity, a mix of biogas, diesel, and all that has to be discussed. So now it's more a partnership, it's more an exchange, and it's a question of confidence as well. That's why we won't say, okay, we just start discussing. We have nothing to sell at the beginning. It's just to say, how can we share something together to understand what is your need? Then we can try to work together. I will also add that digital has changed quite a lot. Now we are also moving to mobility as a service, and I think we have, as a supplier, we need to be integrated in all the digital tools which are now moving in the cities, and I think that we cannot be out of that. So we need also, and we cannot just build everybody's own platform. We need to work together and to make sure that it's the same for the B2C. We are working with BMW on the Drive Now application now that the people can fuel their car automatically and so on. So I think we have really to be partners. We cannot just be a supplier and a purchaser. We have really to be partners. That's really the way the ecosystem should work.
So it's hard to be partners.
No, it's not hard. We are just not used to speak together. So, and then there are, for instance, if you look to cities, we go to elections every 4 years in Portugal. So there's the problem of time, right? How do we invest in the measure in the mid-long term if you only have for granted that you are there for 4 years? But I think what we have to try and do is go for broader local commitment. And for instance, in Lisbon, we have approved by all political forces our plan for climate change, and that gives some stability for the city from the policy level, and that gives for companies a perspective. Okay, those guys are stable in what they are doing. We understand what they are doing. Let's speak together and let's work together. So this kind of stability, I think it's very important, because when you are putting 100 million euros in whatever, you want it to last, right, and to be successful. So this kind of confidence, again, it's very, very, very important. But going to urban logistics, for instance, I think I usually say that there is a difference between passengers and freight, because passengers vote and boxes don't vote, and maybe because of that.
Can we quote you on that?
You can. And the issue is that you see a lot of public policies on passenger transport, but then when you look to the matrix, 70% of the emissions is actually from trucks and services, and it's not enough being made there. If you look for the vehicle, for instance, we don't have yet enough maturity in trucks and buses that work on anything else than fossil fuels. Okay, you can have the biofuels also, of course, but the combustion engine. So, The hydrogen, it's very in the early stage. Electric, it's not that stable. So we need to push that technology further. But then when you look for logistics and services, and by the way, it is said that the packaging sector, it's growing, it's doubling in the next 5 years. How can you cooperate? Almost all the business models for consolidation of urban freight have failed because they have no business model. So how can you grant a better business model to that cooperation between different stakeholders in urban logistics to work together? Just to give you an example, sometimes there are side impacts. We are deploying cycle paths in the city of Lisbon. Lisbon is the city of the 7 hills. It was impossible to cycle, people said. Today we had from 0 cycle paths to 80 kilometers of cycle paths, and we are moving in the next 2 years to 200 kilometers of cycle paths. And cycling, it's already more than 2% of the model split in the city of Lisbon. So you can actually cycle. What happened? It's that companies like Chronopost are now moving for electric cargo bikes, and they are adapting their operation because there is infrastructure in the city where you are giving them the space they need to use different kind of vehicles to have less impact in their operation. So maybe if we sit together with companies like DHL, Chronopost, whatever, then can we plan the cycle paths in a better way so we can have a faster addition to this kind of operations? And so again, I think we have to sit together, but it's not just for conversation, it's actually to act, because we don't have time to discuss, we need action. And that's a very important topic.
Right. So if you had one piece of advice to give to the people who could just as easily be seated on the stage listening to you and talking instead, as to how to speed things along, because a theme here is that we're moving at a certain pace, but probably not fast enough. And so how is it that we could speed things up? What do you think is one piece of advice that either you needed to take yourself or that you would offer to other people that you found works to get movement here? Because that's the theme of the conference, is going from ideas to action. And I think that need for action is extreme. So anything that you could say that would be helpful to people about moving from ideas to action, I think would be really grateful if you'd share that.
I would say there's 2 points for me which are key. First of all, we should not be in opposition. I think we are going to have the cohabitation of various types of energy. We are almost 100% on fossil fuel today, so we cannot change in one day. So we are just going to move. We should not be in opposition. We should work together to have, at the same time, new energy going up and try to be as efficient as possible on the old one, try to move. So we cannot just say it will be done in one day. So we have to keep in mind that, because even in 20 or 30 years, we still have something like 50% of the car which will be based on petrol. So we have to communicate on that. The second thing, I think, we have to work on acceptability. It's just to say, you must take an electric car, as you said, or you must take a gas truck, or you must take an electric bus, because we must all work to make sure that it is feasible, it is acceptable. So we have worked with, we have an affiliate in US, we have purchased a company, a part of a company in US which is dealing with gas and biogas for trucks. We have tried to, what are the pain points? Why the customer are not choosing this energy? Because the trucks were too expensive. So we have decided to finance the difference of the price of the truck. So okay, you have an advantage on the long term, we can finance it now. Now we consider the price was fluctuation. We say, okay, we can fix the price. So we have really to look at what are the pain points of the customer, why they cannot make the difference, and then to assist them to make the difference. We think it is our responsibility to find these small things, which are sometimes monies, sometimes incentives, sometimes chicken and eggs, as we say, because we need to put station first and wait for the cars. It's what we are doing for hydrogen. We are putting station in Germany now. There is not so much cars, but we need to make the effort. So we have to find what are the limitations today and to remove them. It's not big things, it's small things here and there. We need to facilitate the movement and together to work together on that.
Yeah, great. Ursula?
Yeah, I think we need to change our attitude. I believe we shouldn't start with why things are not working and complain about it, but talk about what would it need so that they are working in the end. And for the chicken and egg, for example, one concrete example, we have an agreement with the city of Hamburg in Germany, where we said we have this car sharing service, Drive Now, in the city, and the city wanted to invest in infrastructure for charging. And we agreed that the more charging stations are available publicly, the more we will have electric cars, i3, in our car sharing fleet. And that and that goes step by step. So that we in the end have a more broader possibility to charge not only the car sharing fleet, but also every private car, of course, in the city. And at the same time, in a way, we lead by example with the car sharing service. And this is one of the solutions I really see. And there it was the question, what would it need? And how can we overcome the hurdles? And this attitude is something which we all need, and not complain about, oh, it doesn't work, it's the chicken and egg problem.
Yeah, great.
Well, if I just have to put in one message today, one of the biggest challenges, I will go for kids and teenagers. I learned how to recycle 30 years ago in primary school, and today I feel bad when I don't recycle. If we fully guarantee that the kids in school learn how to ride a bicycle, because today more than half don't know how to ride a bicycle. They know how to ride a public bus. They have access to these tools. Then they will be the adults on 2030, and they will be doing the right decisions. 2 weeks ago, I was in a university with students of the 3rd grade, and I was asking them, how many of you are interested in buying a car in the next 5 years? And only 5 over 100 raise their hand. Maybe because they have access to their father's car, maybe because they have access to the shared car. I didn't ask if they want a driving license. Probably they want a driving license. What they don't need is the car, but as like in an ownership thing. So if we put the right policies for youngsters, and in Lisbon, for instance, transport is for free until you have 12 years old, then we can changing behavior from youngsters, and when they are adults, they probably take the right decisions we need to achieve the targets. Yeah.
Great. So we only have time, I'm afraid, for one question. Sorry. Thank you all. That was terrific. And those answers were really great and very, very helpful to picture what it's like to be doing the work that you're doing. So I have a question, it's kind of a hot seat question. It says, why would we trust companies that have been and still are a key part of the problem to be part of the solution? I believe, unless I'm mistaken, that Ursula and Philippe, that's on you. So what's your response to the skeptical person who says, I hear you, why should I trust you?
I think we are part of the solution because we were part of the problem because we were just selling the energy people will need at that time. I mean, we were just there to supply their need. I think we will be the solution because we will supply what will be their need tomorrow, and we are all convinced that we have to change our habit. But I mean, it's not a question, we should not be responsible for we are not the only one responsible for the past, and we are not going to be the only solution for future. I think we are part of the solution because we know and we have the means and the will to put some energy and to put some decision and to build some infrastructure which will be needed for tomorrow. And I mean, we have a portfolio of customers, we have relation with customers, we have relation with cities, we have relation. So that's also an asset on which we have to build. And I think that we are not going to change the world ourselves alone, but we think we can be part of the solution because the world is with us. I mean.
Yeah, Ursula.
Yeah, of course, we are all part of the problem as a society, and corporates, of course, play a major role because we come up with decisions which are relevant for a lot of stakeholders. Why trust companies? I would always like to talk about the concrete things we are already doing and the vision we have, the targets which we have, and how much progress have we made, for example, to decarbonize our production or to invest in the mobility services, which we just talked about. And this is something where little concrete steps may maybe an investment into trust with stakeholders. And we are doing stakeholder dialogues around the world in all three major regions every year. And we go to cities, talk about urban mobility and what does it need to really make the city a lovely place again to live, and not only a parking space for cars. And these are the things I would want from others as I look at the activities of stakeholders as well and their openness. And this is why I say, yes, there should be a certain part of the trust already now, but if we build on this and come up with bigger solutions, then hopefully we all together have a better future. It sounds very broad now, but the question of trust is really a basic element.
Right. So just in the research that we've done on trust, the foundation of trust is competence. So no one, trust is a very specific thing. I trust you to do this, deliver a car that does these kinds of things. And so I think that the path that you said you're on, which is to prove that you're trustworthy through action, and to show that you're competent to move into this new world, is actually what will help people have the confidence that I think all the people here have, that this is a problem that must be solved, and that it can be solved, right, by the efforts of people like you. So thank you so very much. This has been a great talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.